First panelist, Dr. Robert Calin-Jageman.
Welcome again, and let's get started. Strap in. I'm going to do a quick 5 minutes here. Neuroscience is often in the news, but lately not all that news has been good. We've seen some entire research literatures just implode beneath our eyes, and that shows us that some of our methods and practices are not actually as quality as we thought. Some of the problems we have are certainly related to the complexities of lab protocols and reproducing what we've done. And so the tools and the things that we've been talking about here are certainly going to go a long way to help improve your rigor and transparency. But there is another key factor that we need to think about when we think about reproducibility, and that's sample size. It's just a basic fact of statistics that sampling error is related to your sample size. The bigger your sample, the smaller your expected sampling error, and the more stable your results will be from replication to replication. If all else being equal, smaller sample sizes have larger sampling error, and they're more erratic. They produce results that are less likely to be reproduced, and therefore we have to really critically think about how to manage this, the resources that we spend on our sample size, to assure us that we can get a reliable, robust result that others can actually replicate. Now we know that unfortunately this doesn't always happen in neuroscience. Numerous studies have now shown that it is common for neuroscientists to rely on inadequate samples. This is often called the problem of low power research, but I think a better name is uninformative research. And this is a long-standing problem. There is a literature that warns us about inadequate samples that stretches back literally for decades, all apparently to no avail. So today, what I want to discuss are two problems or misconceptions that help perpetuate this stalemate. First, we often fail to understand just how damaging inadequate samples are to our research enterprise. And second, many researchers don't know how to diagnose if the sample sizes they're using in their lab are actually adequate. So I'm going to try to cover both these topics. I have 3.5 minutes left, so I'm going to be very concise, but hopefully very clear, and I'll end with some resources that you can draw on to get a fuller picture. Let's start with the dangers of inadequate sample sizes and how it's worse than you might think. Now, we all are taught that low power is low efficiency. It means you're likely to fail to detect a hypothesis when it's true. But what most people don't realize is it's not just about your non-significant results. Low power affects your significant results as well. It contaminates them with a high rate of false positives, and it distorts your effect sizes, meaning that they're unlikely to replicate. So even when you think you've won, you've actually lost. You're not building a firm foundation for future research. Let's see how this actually looks. Suppose I'm looking for brain behavior relationships, and these exist, but they're often fairly weak. Say that they're around a correlation of 0.30. Now I use a sample size that's kind of common in this type of research of 25. Now that sounds nice, but the power to detect that level of correlation is only 30%. And so, as we all would understand, that's inefficient. As you can see, I'm drawing random samples here in the simulation, and I'm missing this real relationship 70% of the time. But it's worse than that, because my published results, my significant results, will be deceptive and unreplicable. Why? Because every time I do get a significant result, it's only because I've grossly overestimated the true relationship. You can see that here. Every time the line flicks red, it's a significant result drawn from this. And you can see that the only way I can get a significant result is by passing that critical value of R, which is 0.44. That's a 22% of variance accounted for. That's 2.5 times stronger than the real underlying relationship. So every single significant result I get is tremendously inflated, and that means that anyone following it up is likely to misestimate how strong it is and therefore be unable to replicate my pattern of results. Low power research is not just inefficient, it's deceptive and it's unreliable, and as one recent review said, it's actually worse than doing nothing. So how can you tell if you are using adequate samples in your research? Well, one thing I often have here is, well, P is less than 0.05 in our research, so therefore my sample is adequate. People feel assured because they have significant results. But as I hope that simulation has shown you, that is just wrong. That is not the correct way to diagnose the adequacy of your power. The best way is through direct replication. Adequate power means you can regularly detect an effect, so you prove you have adequate power by regularly detecting effects. And this gets us towards Fisher's idea of how we should actually use p-values, which is that we can accept something as true when we know how to regularly and reliably get a significant result. The only way we can do that is by planning for and budgeting for direct replications of our key results. If when you do this, you see a tendency for your effect sizes to deflate towards non-significance, it means you are likely chasing noise through inadequate samples. Now that's great advice and important, but many times we don't want to wait on or have to do the expense of replicating every single key result. So another key diagnostic is to check your signal to noise. Go back over your recent experiments that were significant. Plot their effect sizes. That's how big of a change you observed versus your margin of error. That's your confidence interval or how wrong you might be. Well-powered research swamps signal with noise. I'm sorry. In well-powered research, signal swamps noise. That's important. Right? With inadequate samples, though, your margin of error is often close to the effect size you're studying. If your margins of error are often close to the effect size you got, you're doing low-power research. Another diagnostic is to check your sample size history and similarity. We'll often have like kind of a standard effect that the lab is doing, and then you tweak it or transgenic or do something to change it. If you often have to add sample sizes to get your baseline effect, you're doing low-power research, and your research is going to be fraught with false positives. Now, if you come to the conclusion that your samples are sometimes inadequate, you don't have to despair. There are solutions. Of course, one thing that we all have to start thinking about and doing as we plan our research is usually to collect more samples, but that's expensive and time-consuming. But there's an important second option, and that's optimization. You can tweak your protocols to maximize your effect. Bigger effects can be studied with smaller samples. You can also maximize the consistency of your protocol to minimize your within-group variance. The more you can tighten up and reduce noise, the more bang for the buck you can get from the same sample size. So that's it. Inadequate samples ruin science, but there are clear and easy diagnostics you can apply to your own research and when reviewing to help detect the problem. And there are actual solutions, not all of which require the expense of running very large studies. If this has piqued your interest, I urge you to check out the Open Science Framework page we have on this. There are reading guides, guidelines, videos, and other resources. You can really dig in deeply to see how this works and what you can do to plan effectively for adequate sample sizes in your own research. And that's it. 5 minutes.